Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The manhwa starts off introducing us to the game Ether World. It was released 10 years ago as a dating simulator, mostly for a female demographic. But it was heavily dominated by male players. It allowed players to play a variety of characters. Starting from easy and efficient characters, to the opposite end of that spectrum, difficult and inefficient. Amongst them was the worst of the worst, one character known for his difficulty level and horrible features. There was one freak who mained this trash character Baek Yeseol for over 10 years. Of course that is none other than our main character, but due to poor translation we don't know his name, just that he enjoys playing Yeseol. Inside of his apartment we see him drinking some coffee, and that there are new posts all over the forum about a new update. They all mention something called the Dark Demon Dragon and how it deleted their characters. He finds it curious that there's a final boss to a dating simulator. Saying it usually ends when you get together with one of the characters. A famous ranker made an entire rant yapping about how the boss is unbeatable. He puts his coffee down saying it doesn't make sense that there'd be a monster with magic nullifying skills in a world full of magic. He says it must be a bug since people are losing their characters. He logs in and sees the dragon, which is called the 13th moon of the Black Night. He explains to us how in Ether World there is a cult known as the Dark Demonic Humans. Their goal is to help another world called Persona Gate to take over the world. When they finally managed to achieve this goal, that is when the Dark Demon Dragon had appeared. He says that 90% of the continent has been taken over by Persona Gate. But it's not like he cares, he only focuses on PvP and not the story. But he can tell the lore is getting messed up, he wonders if that's okay. But says it's not like he can avoid fighting it, so he might as well try it. We see the dragon on his screen, and he clicks yes on the prompt. He says time to put his last 10 years of gameplay to use here. He logs in, and we see Yeseol standing before the dragon. He says if he were to explain his character, he is the only one that is unable to use magic. Despite the fact that everyone else can, which is what makes him so difficult. He is worse than any normal extra in the game. Okay, we lied, he can use some magic, but only one single skill. The boss goes to prepare an attack, and launches it out toward Yeseol. As it gets close, Yeseol grins and we see him teleporting along the backside of the boss, as it's revealed the only spell he can use is blink. He keeps his momentum. Yeseol watches and waits for a chance, and we learn that his blink spell takes him randomly between 3 to 10 meters. The direction he blinks in is also random, so if he doesn't control the distance well he will die instantly due to the speed and impact. On top of that, the cooldown time and mana usage is nuts. There's also a penalty of being unable to move for 2 seconds after using it. So anyone can learn it, but most people don't use it. But in Yeseol's case, he has mastered it. He can control which direction he will go, as well as the distance. And has no penalty on blinking. It doesn't use up his mana since he has no mana to begin with. Unlike other spells, blink was nothing more than just a movement ability. But he became obsessed with Yeseol since everyone about him was skill-based. So over the last 10 years he has only played as him, unable to use magic. We see his attack on the boss's head, as he cuts all the way down its throat landing on the floor. The boss lets out one final scream, and he turns to see its corpse. As a message appears, saying that he's defeated the boss. He says that shit was a straight letdown, he expected it to be harder since Yeseol is a bad character. He says oh well, and that it's nice. He goes to post on the community saying he'll flex it on them. But status windows appear in front of him in real life, saying since the wrong ending has been reached, 90% of Ether World has been destroyed. However, he was the closest to reaching it. He is confused and his heart starts to race, as the message begs him to find the true ending. He screams as a bright light appears and he straight vanishes in his chair. He opens his eyes, and we see him lying on the floor. He sits up asking what is going on, he shivers asking where he is. Then looks over to see a mirror. He moves over to it, and is surprised to see in the mirror that his appearance is actually Baek Yeseol. A window appears, and looks over seeing episode Escape the Chase. He realizes this Yushoel's prologue quests, he says no way and reaches into his pocket and is surprised to see the entrance certificate to Stella Academy. He says it is hard to believe, but it's definitely Ether World. He says he had to be Yeseol, but says he needs to think about it logically to try and reach the true ending. He says he knows there are multiple endings to the game. Then has an idea, he can't believe nobody has reached the true ending in the last 10 years. But says this isn't the time to be thinking about that. Since he remembers this, right after Yeseol wakes up the people chasing after him burst into the hut. He looks outside to see a group of hooded men, and quickly hides out of their line of sight. He says they are already here. One of the men notices a hut and says there's a hut over there. One of them tells the rest to go search it. Yeseol says he knows what is next, and that there is a limit to how long he can avoid them. Since he can't fight them right now either, he wonders what he should do, and a window appears saying that he can use Blink. He is surprised that he can use it this early. Of course we already covered Blink, but since he has magic leakage syndrome, which makes him unable to use mana, it means he doesn't have to worry about the high mana usage, and the spell is his only hope. Now that the short recap is over, snap back to reality. We see that Blink is level 0, and has a cooldown of 3 seconds, and can only be used once. He says he only knows how to do it while controlling a character with a keyboard and mouse. We see the group rushing up to the cabin, and Yeseol hears their footsteps outside and says shit that was fast. He says there's no time left, and all he can do is try it out. He runs out of the cabin, and they spot him running through the woods. They begin to chase him, and he says this is the first part of his prologue. He needs to use Blink to avoid the pursuers. As he keeps running, he explains how they wear magic boots that allow them to run faster. Thus the only way he can successfully escape is if he uses Blink. He calms himself down, saying he's used Blink countless times before. The timing is burned into his muscle memory. They ask him if he has no intentions to stop. He turns to see they are right behind him. The main disadvantage of Blink is that if he fails to control the distance he'll turn into a bug running into a windshield. While he's explaining it to us, a man with a scar yells telling him to die, while going to attack him. Yeseol continues his explanation saying it's a different case when he uses it. He teleports out of the man's attack and creates distance. He says he did it and they are surprised, wondering if he is a mage. What I'm guessing is the leader, tells them it's good for them since the user is paralyzed for 2 seconds after. But sees that isn't the case as Yeseol keeps moving. As he keeps running, he tells himself he needs to use it carefully, and has to use the uneven terrain to his advantage. Since players who can't use Blink, can't make it to the next scenario. 99% of the Yeseol players couldn't pass the prologue. Even the 1% who did were unable to surpass the all of Blink distance control, and continuous blinking. He starts to count down and once he hits 0 he blinks across the terrain. Scar Bro asks if he's insane for using Blink in this state. He tells those who can use magic to move to the front line and attack that bastard. We see their mage squad pull up. Yeseol recognizes what they are planning. The second part of the prologue forces the player to use Blink, avoiding the magic being cast at them. In the game you can see everything behind you since it's a monitor, which made it much easier to dodge. Since his magic leakage syndrome trait is being used, its positive aspects come out called sixth sense and cognitive acceleration. Bro starts thinking in 4K, and can feel the trajectories of the arrows behind him. He starts to dance between the attacks, and when there's one he cannot avoid, he says now is the time. He takes a half step forward then blinks. To avoid the massive attack that it was. He turns behind him to see the crater left behind from the attack. And says that was too close for comfort. He keeps running, saying the final part is coming up now. He starts to catch his breath as we see floating rocks and a giant canyon in front of him. He says that crossing this is the next part. But the only way to do it is to control his Blink distance perfectly, then he can meet up with some passing mages and escape, which is the end of the prologue. He will need to cancel his spell, which occurs in 0.1 seconds. If he fails even once, he is dead right here. He says there are 20 floating boulders, and that the 0.1 seconds is easier said than done. And asks what kind of freak would make this part of the prologue. However, it is still doable. The problem is, and we hear the group behind him. They point out saying there he is, they are much closer than he anticipated. And says the distance between them is about 100 meters and since his cooldown is 3 seconds it won't be enough to make it across. So there's only one choice left for his survival, he needs to kill all of his pursuers. We see him hiding behind a rock, saying he knows this is really crazy. How can he try and do this when he's never even been in a fight before? He says if this were a game the system would make it impossible to attack those that are chasing him. But in reality that's not the case, there are no rules forcing him to play how the game has intended it. The thought of killing someone doesn't bother him. Well, specifically these guys, as they are his parents' enemies in the story. He hears their footsteps right behind the rock, and says they are here, and he truly believes he can win. He reveals himself to them, and Scar says there he is. He orders his men to go catch him. As they charge at Yeseol, he takes a stance ready to fight. One of them smirks, asking if he dares fight them all alone, saying that he is going to die here. Yesiel sees how far he needs to go and casts blink. The guy is surprised as he feels a sharp pain in his chest. Scar is also confused, as we see the guy not moving, until he starts to cough up a lot of blood. It lands on Yesiel's face, and he says the feeling of blood running down his fingertips outweighs any feeling of guilt he has towards these people. He slices at the man, saying that he's only doing it for survival, then kicks him towards his friends. Scar catches him, and they see that Yesiel starts to run away. They say not to let him escape no matter what. Yesiel says he took one down, but it won't be so easy next time. He wonders how to go about it, and wonders why it's so quiet. He glances behind, and sees they are right on his ass. He realizes they didn't give up, and that they might be using magic. His foot begins to slip, and Scar says this is their chance, telling his magicians to attack him. He begins to chant for his spell, and launches a fire arrow at Yesiel. As it gets close, it's revealed that there are actually many fire attacks being launched toward him. Yesiel says there's so many of them, but spots somewhere to escape to. He jumps towards it and casts blink, leaving the attacks exploding where he was before. As the smoke settles from the attack, they think that he has been killed from it, but sees that the crater is empty, and he realizes that Yesiel isn't there. But we see him coming from the top rope. The man looks up to see him directly above him. Yesiel says one of the peculiarities of blink is that it maintains the same momentum before and after use. He activates blink again, stabbing the man in the chest without giving him a chance to react. The man screams, and another one of the men hear it, wondering what's going on. But he is quickly dispatched as well by Yesiel slices through him. A cold sweat runs down Scar as he sees his comrade's lifeless body beside Yesiel. He starts to huff, clearly getting tired, and says there are only two left now. He needs to end it before the two who fell behind catch up to them. Scar says he's quite unique, and he has a fast reaction speed for a mage, and asks Yesiel who exactly he is. Yesiel says his reaction speed is indeed faster than most pro gamers. But that's only in online games. He can't just keep dodging forever, especially in such close proximity. He decides that he needs to end it before it drags out. Scar says he's already figured his style out, and he only uses blink along with his dagger. As long as he protects his vitals, a dagger won't be a problem to him. Yesiel gets closer, and Scar yells, casting a spell called Ice Wave. Yesiel returns with blink, and Scar thinks that it's over for him due to his spell going out first. But then hears behind him that his comrade has just had their throat slit by Yesiel. Scar realizes he was baited into thinking he was the target. And earlier he ran like someone who's never been in combat before, but now it's different. Yesiel says that was earlier. But now that he's practiced on them, he feels confident. Scar gets pissed, saying they went easy on him. That's their fault for underestimating him. He shouts, saying that he'll kill him right now. Yesiel isn't afraid and rushes forward at him. He rears his shoulder back, and yeets the spear he picked up as it flies at Scar. Scar says that using a blink head-on puts him at a risk of being counterattacked. So the spear is bait. He blocks it, saying he won't let him have his way, and smirks, saying he'll now appear right beside him. And he swings to his right, but realizes that he was once again baited into thinking that's where he'd be, as he gets stabbed through the chest by Yesiel. Officially ending the first episode of escaping his pursuers, he obtains some experience, and has been given a reward for uniquely beating the story. Yesiel falls to the floor panting, and he is clearly gassed out from all of that. His hand too shaky to even reach for his sword. He looks over at Scar's corpse, and the fact that this is reality sets in. He understands that this isn't a dream, he just experienced all of that for real, his first fight, his first blink, and his first murder. He looks a bit conflicted, but says he did it to survive. After a little rest, he stands up, saying it's time to leave this place, but realizes something. He says wait, and turns around to look at Scar's corpse. He starts digging through his pockets, saying realistically he has no money. But there is around 2 million credits. I guess millions aren't much over there. He looks back at the cliff, saying that this is the only real problem left. He steps to the edge, and starts to think about how to go about it. We hear some people across from it, asking if anyone is there, saying to come this way. He recognizes them as the group of mages who appear in the tutorial. They wave over at him, and he yells, saying he is there. They ask him if he is able to cross without there being a bridge. He says yes, he'll be heading over soon. One of the mages tell the rest to wait, since he said he'll be crossing. Another one says that for him to cross he'd have to be a third-class knight, asking how a boy could do that. He says that he isn't sure, but is surprised after seeing him blink across to one of the rocks. They are both stun-locked, as he does it yet again. Some of them see this display and wonder if it's a type of jumping magic. Someone from the back says it's blink, and they turn to reveal a girl saying that he is blinking across. One of them asks how it's a blink when he's able to control the distance and direction, asking how that would even be possible. Then he is surprised, as he sees two people behind Yeseol, and wonders if they are with him. But he quickly realizes that's not the case as they begin to cast offensive magic. The spell actually looks hella sick. It's like Pum's revolver from one of the other series on the channel. Yeseol sees it behind due to them warning him, and he uses blink to avoid the attack. He turns to see that the mages aren't giving up, and that this is turning dangerous. His cooldown is 3 seconds, so dodging all of their magic with that isn't possible. He has to find the next floating stone to use as a foothold. But with sixth sense he senses them casting another. This time it's a dark beam. He barely avoids it, losing some of his hair. But the platform beneath him starts to fall. He looks around saying all of the stones are too far, and says he just has to hope to land on one. He casts blink, and manages to latch on to one of the edges of the rock, saying that he survived somehow, but he spoke too soon as the next fire arrow is launched at him. As it gets close he says he's cooked, but some kind of blue spell comes in clutch, blowing the fire arrow away from him, completely evaporating the fire arrow. Yeseol is surprised, saying that it was an ice spear covered with lightning. And someone with 2 attributes in the tutorial is rare, and not only that, but they calculated the trajectory without wasting any mana. He wonders who is capable of such a thing, and looks at the mages, to see that it was the girl from earlier. The enemy magicians realize they are outclassed, and quickly turn, admitting their defeat. As they walk away Yeseol sighs out of relief, saying that it seems like he'll live. A bit later he makes it across, and sees the girl who saved him. He thanks her for doing it, and she says that she didn't do it for gratitude. He says okay, but starts saying her voice is hella cute, but says that approaching her would be hard. He looks over across the cliff, explaining how to others they just seem like bandits. But in reality, they are a part of the dark demon cult we talked about earlier. But that ends here, as he's in the territory of the mages. They won't be able to pursue him any longer. And that they don't even know who he is in the first place. A status window starts to fade in, saying it's episode 2, time to enroll in Stella Academy. Guess the translators had a stroke typing episode. He says this one shouldn't be too hard, but asks why the hell he has to go back to school at such an age. We see their carriage riding off, through some foggy terrain, and inside the back is Yeseol, who is slumped out, but is clearly having a nightmare of sorts. We see the real Yeseol as a kid tugging on his mother's clothing, saying that he's gonna grow up to be a mage. She smiles proudly, saying she believes in him. Then his parents worked hard and saved enough money to get him a book on magic. So he studied diligently to make his parents proud and happy. We see his mother covering him up after studying all night. Very wholesome. Then it cuts to her being surprised by the doctor telling her about Yeseol's monoleak syndrome. Yeseol says there is no way this is true. He wonders if these are Yeseol's memories, if they are his. He snaps out of it, and wakes up. With a headache, he looks outside to see that it is now morning. One of the other passengers say they were just about to wake him up, as they are about to arrive in Lizoicha, a smaller city near Arcanium. Their carriage comes to a halt, and the mages decide to take a break here. Yeseol starts stretching, and sees the girl who saved him staring at him. He finds it surprising, but she instantly turns around. And he says that is quite cold. But things are going well considering how worried he was. The timeline is closer to modern times rather than the Middle Ages. Inside of major cities they have trains, flying ships and warp gates, to make long-distance travel convenient. When they make it to Lizoicha they'll board a flying ship, which will take them to Arcanium, which is where the real episode begins. There are renowned magic towers as well as mage knight orders, and 5 renowned academies in Arcanium. The academy with the most powerful mages and most excellent students is Stella Academy, which means that it's full of geniuses and nobles from all over the world. He still doesn't know how Yeseol got admission in the first place. He says that he also forgot to check his skills. We get a more in-depth look at monoleakage syndrome, MLS, from now on. He says without sixth sense and detection acceleration he would be dead already. His physique is cursed as he cannot accumulate mana, and was a curse he happened to be born with. However, it allows him to detect mana around him with his sixth sense. It allowed him to sense any attacks coming toward him within a certain radius, of course. Detection acceleration allowed him to sense things as if time had been slowed down, so even the attacks that seem impossible he could deal with. It's a necessary skill for Yesiol since he can't use mana, but he can't use sixth sense for long, and it eats up his mental, so it has pretty heavy consequences after. Next up are his stats. He opens the tab. We see most of them are 1 star. He says that is actually quite decent starting stats. The original Yesiol had low sensitivity. So it seems like it took part of the stats he would have had, and put them into Yesiol. He explains how skills have levels, but stats are starred. The maximum stat level is 9 stars, but that is impossible to reach. He played for 10 years, and the highest he reached was 8 stars for stamina and sensitivity. But he decides to invest into sensitivity to boost sixth sense and his reaction speed, as he can raise most of his other stats through training. He says now the problem is the MLS. If he doesn't train it he won't survive for long, and he needs it to upgrade to Secrets of Nature physique. It'll be explained more later. The way to reinforce MLS is within Stella Academy. This means he has no choice but to go to Stella, if he wants to find the true ending and treat his syndrome. He doesn't want to go back to school, and he wished he had something to help. A window appears saying he has missed notifications. He wonders what it is, but gets told it's time to get going. He decides to check them later. The blue-haired girl watches him leave and it cuts to a flying ship. The announcement says they'll be leaving for Arcanium, so take a seat. Some really well-dressed people look over and see Yesiol, saying he looks like a lost kid, asking if he's never been on a flying ship before. They call him a country bumpkin, and click their tongue wondering why Stella has to let peasants in. The man says it's supposed to be the most renowned in the world, and they are sullying the waters with people like him. Yesiol looks at them, but pays it no mind and sighs, saying that kids are the same anywhere you go. They start to get annoyed, asking if he sighed at them. This angers the purple-haired one, and he barks saying to stop there. But the other boys are stun-locked. He wonders why everyone is so loud. Then turns to see a white-haired girl, and stutters saying Princess Bien. Yesiol turns and asks if he just said Bien. She is the princess of the Adalebet kingdom. She walks past everyone, and the purple-haired boy greets her. She glares at him, and he freezes up. Second-hand embarrassment from this one. She walks past Yesiol, and he says she's considered a villainess in this world. She is one of the main characters in the game. She and the main female protagonist always argue, and Bien dies in the end, regardless of what route you take. In some she is brutally murdered, in others she's bullied by the entire academy before being expelled. In one she goes through something so shameful, she never appears in front of the public again. As if the developers had personal resentment and wanted her to suffer. Yesiol says he knows she's popular among the male players since she's pretty. But he feels like she'll kill him if he talks to her. His stomach growls, and he says he should go eat. We see a lot of nice looking food, but he is devastated with only 1 can of something. He says this shit is all too overpriced. So he'll wait until they land. Another announcement comes over, saying it would like everyone to be aware that they are arriving in Arcanium in 10 minutes. So make your way to the first floor. He repeats the announcement and Yesiol smirks saying it's finally starting. And that this is his new reality, and it's time to do this. But then he jumps to being gloomy, saying it's good he resolved it. Honestly not sure if there was something that was skipped or not, left me a bit confused. He wonders if he will be able to survive in the academy, or rather will he be able to survive in this world. He looks out the window, then remembers the notifications he had to check. He opens them up, and it says the Constellation Project offers him a special reward. 1. A downgraded version of the items he used in the game. 2. A downgraded version of the skills he acquired in game, or 3. Just experience. He starts to think about which one to pick, and wonders if he could get a few specific items, but it says the item's quality is too high and will be severely downgraded. He asks for another called Hyperspace Blink. Since it's an advanced version of Blink it cannot be acquired. But he can enhance Blink slightly. He asks if he truly has to downgrade. The system says due to his lack of narrative power they aren't able to materialize fully. He wonders what it is, and it says the force that drives the progression of the story is called narrative power. If he continues to explore unknown branches of the story like yesterday, it will accumulate. So in short they can't give him anything late game worthy since he is a newbie. He asks about something called the Bulbul glasses. The system digs through, and says it can be provided. He decides to go with that then, and they appear in his hand. He says he can't believe the day would come when he is actually wearing this thing. It's an item that contains all of the information he's collected while playing the game. In Ether World, it was impossible to recall and read information about hunted monsters or acquired knowledge. So players developed various items to store info. And that he is one of those players too, he puts them on. It consumes mind power, but it remembers every single piece of knowledge he has seen. It has 2 abilities, folder and seal. He opens the folder, showing a whole list about game information. He looks at some of it, saying this is good enough. Since this is real life, there's no way for him to tell how much grinding he could do using the game system. But with these glasses he can at least regain half of his previous ability. We hear some students talking about a woman named Azel. He looks up to see the blue-haired girl who saved him. She is apparently the daughter of a trader named Dutch Malf. They ask how dare she show her face here. Yesiel doesn't recall the name, but looks through his glasses seeing that she is a fake heroine who dies later on. He says to explain it there is one thing he must point out, although the place he is in is a game called Ether World. The fact is that it's a game based on the original fantasy romance novel called Don't Love the Princess. And the novel is about Aziel who had lost her entire family. She grows by confronting the schemes of the villainous Bien. And eventually ends up with the male protagonist. In the end her revenge motif disappears and the male character protects her. It had a sad ending after receiving harsh feedback from its readers. He says even though the game is based on the novel, the story is completely different. In the game an original character named Flame was added and took the role of heroine. This character named Flame had a backstory. She came from the modern world, and enjoyed reading the novel, and was transported into this world. So unlike the novel, Aziel became the fake heroine of the game, while Flame took her spot. Despite many attempts from the players, it was said that she was unsavable. But he says none of this matters to him. He wonders if it's his imagination, saying he feels like he's seen her before. Okay, this main character has brain delay. How many ice lightning mages does he know? Someone had to say it. He decides it was just his imagination, and decides to hop off. Inside of Stella Academy, we see students everywhere and a man says as they are aware the dark demonic humans are the mages who embrace the otherworldly powers and transform into monsters. Even at this moment they continue their invasion by opening persona gates, or liberating ancient dungeons. Their destiny as mages is to protect the world from the forces of darkness. The students start to talk about how boring of a speech this is. The man says next up they will have the oath ceremony for the 4 students with the highest scores, and the freshman representative. He calls for the students to all come up onto the podium, and we see the 5 people he called forward. Yesiel says their faces are shining, and it's fitting for the main characters. However, the brightest one among them is obviously the representative Ma Yusong. He had the highest score overall. Yesiel says that's him. He is a character that is pretty much just him. He has a mana status of 9 stars, possessing the potential to close the realm of deities. He's a natural genius who can use all of the elements. Even if he can't reach the true ending, he wants to avoid any of the bad endings, so he has to get Yusong on his side. But he says that will be completely up to Flame, the other person from his world. He says it's up to how she acts. Since she's from his reality it might be good to get along with her. But things will get complicated if she considers him an enemy. He has the upper hand in terms of information. She is just a possessor from the novel, but he is a possessor from the game. Although his importance the story is even less than a shop NPC in a village. He also tells us how Flame has the ability to cleanse the dark demonic humans. But aside from that, she has the ability that lets her make those around her poor. Weird wording maybe. So being around her would affect him for sure. His role is to support the main characters from afar. And to not get involved with them as much as possible. The entrance ceremony is finally over and episode 2 has been completed. It jumps to show a wider view of Stella Academy then back to Yesiel inside of a lecture hall. He says it's been a while since he graduated university, so it feels weird to be a high schooler again. But still it doesn't feel bad since he has this little watch. It's the Stella Pocket Watch. That proves you are a student at the academy. If you have this you receive much better treatment and service than those with Magic Warrior licenses. He says he can't wait to use it. Their teacher enters, and he tells everyone to take their seats. As they will now begin exams, so put away all items other than writing supplies, and those with glasses will be examined prior. He says that Stella's academy curriculum is more rigorous than most Korean universities. You take an exam on your first day. It's called a class organization exam. Pretty much a class placement exam. The teacher says it's time to begin the exam. Yesiel looks down and says that he has no idea what it says. The class placement exam is unrelated to the entrance exam, that is notorious for its crazy difficulty. Students are assigned from F to S classes based on the exam. Of course, most playable characters are obviously in the S class. But Yeseol placed last among the students. He wonders if he could just hand in a blank page, or if he'd be expelled. He looks over to see Yusong, who yawns out of boredom. Yeseol says he expected no less, seeing his paper finished. And it's no wonder he is always bored. The nature of his character all wraps back to boredom. He was born in the strongest family in the world, and as he has the most genius brain and talent in the world, everything is too easy for him. Which is why, based on how the female lead acts, his disposition would be decided as good or evil. The dark demonic humans who work to bring the humans to ruin would obviously be very interested in Yusong. But his biggest issue is his family to begin with. He says looking at geniuses makes him compare himself even more. He wonders if he can use his glasses on this. He pulls them out, saying he's got nothing to lose. The professor walks by him asking what's with his glasses. And he said that if you were going to use them you needed to get them checked prior. He says oh yeah he did. The professor says he'll check them. He pours some mana into it and looks at it. Yeseol says if he gets caught he might be expelled. Then the window makes a sound, asking him if he would like to activate the glasses. He says no, and to stay asleep. The professor thinks about it, and gives it back, saying he can't feel mana from it. So to make sure to ask beforehand next time. Yeseol says if the original functions were working, that'd have been horrible. He turns on the glasses, and says he can actually see the answers. And that this is a jackpot. He wonders what'll happen if he gets first place. And he starts writing, saying he'll escape F class for sure, maybe even get a class. But the professor says the exam is over, and that he'll collect their papers. Yeseol is surprised, then the papers all get sent flying toward the professor. He says he only finished 3 questions. The professor starts to look at them. And Yeseol says he thought he'd escape F class, but he's doomed. But he looks up at the professor, who yells for him to give him his glasses. Yeseol does so, and the professor imbues mana into it again, saying there is no way. He tells a student to go bring Dr. Grayan over. Yeseol wonders what's wrong, saying he wrote the answers process clearly so he wouldn't be accused of cheating. And if he was caught or not. We see the professor asking Grayman what he thinks. He analyzes the glasses, saying the fact he solved the question is suspicious. The professor asks if he cheated, but Grayman says no. He can't feel any magic from the glasses or his items. So he definitely solved it with his own ability. Grayman says it's interesting, and we learn the professor's name is Lee Hanwol. Grayman tells him to apologize to the student. Hanwol quickly does so, apologizing to Yeseol. But of course he cheated, and would have been in trouble if it was turned on. He tells Hanwol to be careful in the future. It cuts back to another outside shot, then we see Hanwol's office. Inside he is going over some papers, and seems to be thinking about something. His colleague calls out to him, asking if he's grading the freshmen's exam papers. He tells her yes, and she says that she heard there are many interesting freshmen this year. She is a part of the Council of Elders. She is named Adeltamen. Hanwol says yeah, apparently so. From the most renowned family of fire magic. Hong Bian is attending, the crown prince of the Scalvan Empire. Jeremy has surpassed his older brothers purely from his magical talent alone. From the world's greatest magic tower, the Full Moon Tower, Hei Wonryong, the successor. She says that she's heard it was tough to set the exam questions high enough due to how many talented students there were. Hanwol says that he is glad she's enjoying it. But as she mentioned, the exam had 3 questions at the start that were meant to be too hard for students to solve normally. The intention behind the 3 questions was that if you can't solve it you should just skip it. Second, how would you solve a problem that didn't appear in any of the books they studied so far? The era of magic where memorization and theory prevailed is now over. Now is the age of combat using quick judgment and creative thinking. But the questions were not meant to be solved. Over 1,000 of the 1,141 students let them blank. On the other hand, the 100 students who attempted them most couldn't get a single answer semi-correct. Among the new students, only 3 of them got all 3 correct. Ma Yusong, the prodigy of the century, and Flame, who got special admission from the principal. Then there is Yeseol. Yusong and Flame are geniuses, but he's sure Yeseol had the lowest admission score. He didn't expect him to solve them at all. Especially when he didn't solve any other problem. Adele says she was wondering why he's so interested in the score, saying there must be one that makes no sense. She says it makes sense though, as countless formulas and equations failed to solve them. So what would a student know? Hanwol asks her if she thinks the student might be a genius. She says it might be a coincidence. She leaves and he lets out a sigh. We learn that the principal only let Yeseol in due to his control over Blink. Hanwol says it must be that the students who are specially granted admission are just different. He smiles, saying a mage who specializes in Blink, he'll find out soon enough if it was coincidence or not. We see students all talking, and they mention the class assignment was posted on the bulletin board. The students wonder what they'll get. One of them says his mom said not to come home if he isn't in a class. Yeseol just can't believe he has to check it in person, saying in game he could see it with one click. He makes it to the board, and a student notices him, saying that he's Beck Yeseol, the one who got a 0 on the magic application section of the entrance exam. They openly mock him, asking how he got into Stella, saying they are questioning the school's standards now. Yeseol says he doesn't care about their yapping, he just wants to see what class he got placed in. He looks up and his name isn't in the F class. He wonders if he failed for only answering 3 questions. Some other students say his name shouldn't be here, and that there should be a mistake here. They start to talk about other students and how they ranked in the double digits and were placed in the A class. Yeseol wonders what they are talking about this time, and goes over to check it out and is surprised to see that his name is inside of the S class. He says this can't be, and that only the most special students are placed in S class. It's different from the other grades with multiple classes per grade. Class S only has 41 students, and only one class. He says this is a mistake, and it's low-key stressing him out. He says now he's forced to deal with the main characters. Getting involved with the protagonist will threaten his already short life, but he can't change his class soon. So he'll keep a low profile instead. He says he'll just manage for now. We see Flame looking at him, and she's got something on her mind. It cuts to a room where we see Bien being slapped by what I assume is her mother. Asking how she got 3 questions wrong, even Azel only got 2 wrong. She is the fire element professor, named Hong Yil, definitely her mother. She says she wasn't able to answer them, that even insects got correct, which means she is lower than even insects. So she should think of herself as a bug and do it again. She asks her if she understands. In a broken tone, Bien says yes. Her mother looks down on her, and lets out a sigh, saying to listen to her, she can't afford to be like her. She was chased out of the kingdom and is holding on to a stupid professor's job. And that she cannot become the shame of a kingdom. She says that she needs to become better than her sister. Yil begins to smile, asking again if she understands. Again Bien says yes, but in reality she doesn't understand. She just lives the way she was taught, and is only as good as she's been taught. She begins to cry, asking why she has to be tormented like this. Poor girl. It cuts again to the S class. We see the students all sitting down and Yeseol says he is screwed, and most people here are weirdos. Again he quickly overhears the students asking how he's here. Apparently some of their parents protested that he is in their class, but the principal assured that he was fit for the class. Yeseol laughs, saying it looks like he is an outcast. But they've been hard working since they were young. He'd be frustrated too if a known idiot like him was in the same class. But their classes can change based on performance. But there are very few cases of someone being demoted, and there will be more people that move from A class to S class later on. But he is still amazed that the game characters are all in front of him. And most students here will become famous worldwide. And 5 of them may betray the magic world. Yusong is one of them. He looks over at Flame, saying if she could stop that it would be nice. Hanwol enters, telling them all to stop talking. Yusin is surprised, and Hanwol says it's nice to meet them all. He's sure some know who he is, but he'll formally introduce himself. He is their professor, Lee Hanwol. Some of them talk about how the amount of dark demonic humans he's hunted has reached 4 digits. He's a 7th class magic warrior. He is really on a whole other level. He tells them to settle down. He says it seems like there's a lot of talent here, and a very unique student too. As they all know, this place is to foster combat mages. As magic warriors they'll experience a rigorous education over 3 years. He doesn't expect any of them to follow, but he'd like them all to show their best during this time frame. He asks if there are any questions. Nobody says anything, and he says good. It's time to start the class. Bien enters the room, with a visible injury on her face. Yusong is surprised that Bien, more than anyone, is late. She walks to Hanwol, and Yusong wonders what happened. He puts his glasses on to check it out. He doesn't see anything that stands out, besides the guaranteed to die thing. But says she is fated to die because of either Flame or Azel. Which of course is why she is the fated villainess, not because she is evil. He'd like to save her, but he isn't in a position to help anyone. Hanwol tells her to take her seat. Yusong sighs, saying he feels bad but needs to keep his distance. But he is confused, as she walks straight up to him and looks down at him. He wonders what she's doing, and she takes the seat right beside him. He asks what this is, saying this doesn't feel good. Hanwol says before they start the class, they'll have their staff selection for what they'll be using while in school. The S and A class will have their staff selections together. Yusong says this is a bit annoying, but he is looking forward to it. There are two big events in Stella Academy. One of them is the familiar contract ceremony. The other is the staff succession ceremony. Like the premier academy that Stella Academy is, the ceremony is very special. They go to a different area, and Hanwol asks if everyone is here. He says the staffs ranging from the lowest class to the high middle class are prepared here. All they have to do is go to a staff they like and grab it. The process of switching one on is complicated. Yeseol says they aren't actually the ones picking their staffs. In Ether World, the staffs only respond to those they deem worthy of commanding them, causing a resonance effect. It basically means that you can't use the high-level ones just because you want to. He stops and looks around, wondering which one he should choose. If it was before, he'd pick one worthy of F class, but now he has to choose carefully as he is in S class. He says the staff that fits his position the best is the wand. He explains how staffs are divided into two classes, short form and long form. Short forms are usually wielded by the knight class, who spam magic quickly, while long form is generally for those who focus on single spells with long cast times. The others start to gossip about what Yeseol is going to pick, saying surely he has no problem with the resonance effect. He still doesn't care since they are kids, and says they can think whatever they want. Someone calls out to him, and Yeseol is surprised, and asks him who he is. He says his name is Yuzlek. The students mentioned him earlier. Yeseol says he's never heard of him before though. Yuzlek asks him which one he plans to pick. He says he'll just pick anything. Yuzlek mocks him, saying to pick a staff that suits a commoner. And he shouldn't cause trouble for the professors. Yeseol doesn't want to talk to him anymore, and says that he shouldn't either. Yuzlek gets embarrassed, and shouts at him, asking if he's picking a fight. Yeseol sighs, saying this is annoying, and equips his glasses, which says that Yuzlek is a third-rate bully. He puts it up asking why there is so little info, and realizes that this dude is just a damn extra. Yuzlek points out to the one he plans to pick, saying to watch carefully. Yeseol looks at it and recognizes it as the Edmuri Adamiri, which should be the highest one here. A high middle-class staff is usually for pro-magic warriors. On the other hand, no matter how talented you are, middle-low class is usually the limit for students. Especially since even the professional magic warriors are barely able to grab a hold of the middle-low class staffs. There is another high middle class staff here other than the Adamiri. It isn't really here for anyone to pick. Its sole purpose is to be a flex. Hanwol tells them all to stand in front of the staffs they like. We see Wonryong with his, along with Jeremy, and even Bian. Then a massive resonance is seen from them all as they all got accepted by the middle class staff. The students say that's crazy, as certified magicians are only capable of wielding middle-class staffs. Yuzlek starts to feel outdone. He says he'll show them what he can do. They all see Yuzlek approaching his staff, and ask if he's really trying to go for such a high-rank staff. He stretches his hand out, saying this is what true talent looks like. He grips it and a bright light is seen around the room. Yeseol says he expected as much. He failed to resonate. We see him on the floor in pain, and the students say someone should call a professor. And they guess the high middle class staffs are going to be impossible. Yeseol says it is best for them to give up, because only one person here will get one. Yusong approaches it while humming a tune. He looks down at it. If you've watched till the end, comment, hammer, to let me know. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.